How dangerous is Vladimir Putin right now?
Well, it's getting more dangerous, certainly. I don't think we're yet at the worst of this crisis, which has got really quite a long way to go, not just through a difficult winter, but also into a new fighting season in the spring and summer of next year. Uh, his nuclear threats are designed to try and frighten the West in particular and split it off from its support for Ukraine. But we haven't yet, as far as I am aware, seen any heightened Russian state of alert for its nuclear forces, for example. And there are plenty of other steps that Putin can take to escalate this situation short of actual use of a nuclear weapon. So it's more of the same in a sense of Russia trying to use its nuclear power status to steal territory, but it isn't yet, I think, a really actual threat. I suspect that although Putin is in a difficult spot, he probably does half believe that this partial mobilization will make a difference, and it might indeed prolong the conflict, but I don't think it will change the direction of travel because Russia depends not just on men, and most of these new ones will be poorly trained, but also on weaponry and ammunition. And he's already been reduced to buying weaponry and ammunition from North Korea.
You mentioned a little earlier in your answer saying that there are steps that Putin can take to escalate the conflict that aren't the use of a nuclear weapon. What kind of steps are you talking about?
He can even more aggressively than he has done already target not just Ukrainian civilian targets, but Ukrainian infrastructure. He's already been playing around with the risks to nuclear power plants, but there's much more he can do to cripple the Ukrainian economy if he puts his mind to it. And he can also, God forbid, but try and target Ukrainian decision makers, President Zelensky himself, and targets in Kiev that have been left untouched for quite a number of months now. So there's really, I repeat, a long way to go. Putin will be hoping desperately, I think, increasingly desperately, that by squeezing Europe on energy this winter and threatening dire retribution if anybody touches Russian territory, he will start sowing doubts and split Western cohesion, breaking Europe and the United States away from Ukraine. That's his goal. And I think he still believes he can achieve it, even though he's clearly in a considerable domestic political crisis. On Friday last, he was saying that he had no change of plans, and now he's done something that we know from Western intelligence sources he really, really did not want to do, which is at least partial mobilization, which makes the war so much more real for people in the big Russian cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg.
I'm interested in what could happen within Russia. We talk about the number of people, arrested in Russia. You're speaking there about how the war could become more unpopular because of this mobilisation. What do you think the reaction in Russia could be? And is there a chance, I guess, that it could be some kind of uprising in Russia that tries to stop the war or even, overthrows Putin, I guess?
Well, this is an increasingly fluid crisis for all concerned, and so I suppose it's rash to rule out any scenario. But President Putin, as a good KGB officer, has a very, very, very good grip on security in Russia, and I don't think uprising is particularly likely. But we have just seen him cave in on a critical policy matter to Russian hawks, who are even further to the right of him. So he is politically vulnerable, even if he's not facing a palace coup or popular demonstrations that get out of control. And I feel that in some ways his announcement today marks the beginning of a long, slow end to the Putin era.
That's interesting to hear your assessment of how he is politically and the strength that he has politically in Moscow. What, as far as you're aware, is the situation on the ground? We've obviously had these weeks where we've been told about these very strong Ukrainian advancements, then other reports that perhaps there's more resistance from Russia than they were finding initially. What's your assessment of where the war is at?
My I don't have any great inside knowledge, but my impression is that the scale of the Russian uh, withdrawal has been more damaging politically than militarily. Some Russian forces have withdrawn in good order. They're perhaps now on better defended lines than they were before. And it's quite likely that in the northeast, the Ukrainians are going to find it difficult to make significant further advances between now and when winter descends and it gets a bit more difficult and Ukrainian capacity really runs out. So I think the Ukrainians have done what they needed to do before the winter, which is to persuade their Western backers that they can win, they can make progress, provided they are supported economically and militarily by the West. But we may not see much more in the way of big change on the ground for some months to come now.